long time there's going to be complementary, and I say, even if AIs do 95% of what we do, like, comparative advantage is very powerful, but we're going to reach a point, I think, where that is no longer the case. And my hope is actually the fact that everyone is in the same boat as consumers. Because if all of us are in the same boat, then we'll all have to figure it out together. I'm actually more afraid of a world in which it's like, half the jobs are automated, right? I worry that, but then we have a world where half the people just say, screw you, they're just like, oh, well, I guess my job must have been intrinsically more valuable. I must be more valuable as a human being. And of course, that's an illusion. That's motivated thinking. Well, we won't be able to engage in it if it happens to everyone. I don't know for sure what the solution is, but it just must have something to do with the idea that our meaning can't derive exclusively from the economic value that we generate, right? Like somehow you have to have some other way of structuring our lives. I mean, maybe we can generate economic value by augmenting ourselves with the machines or something. I don't have the answers here. In fact, I suspect this is one of these questions that you kind of can't work out ahead of time, right? If you went to like hunter-gatherers, 5,000 years ago, we said, someday there will be more food than any of you, and so, we won't need to organize our society around, building spheres and, who can do a better job of, taking down a mammoth and distributing the meat. And you were like, guys, ideas, how to organize, I don't think you would have gotten anything very good. But we worked as we built industrial civilization, we worked out a new way to do things. The challenge now is that I think it's all happening very fast. That's the source of all the problems here. It's all happening very fast. I mean, I think it might be better if it all happened a bit slower. But when these things are compelling economically, it's very difficult to hold them back for more than a very small amount of time. And I think all I can do to help with that is to kind of start the conversation and offer my ideas, which probably aren't very good, but you got to start somewhere. Global events.
So the warning that the impact of climate change is getting more severe and we're not prepared.
Breaking news.
Following allegations of potential fraud raised by the Times.
In an organization, when you have like an organization or a company, whatever its governance structure is. Kind of ultimately, the founders, the people in charge, are kind of the one who set the direction. And so, if you feel like someone who's going about something the right way, or if the direction isn't quite the right direction, I think I tried for a very long time to point out concerns, to say like, this isn't the way we should do things. This is how I think we should do things. I think at the end of the day, it's just not that effective. It's just not that effective because if someone has a different vision, then either they'll frustrate your vision or they won't fully understand what you're getting at. And like I don't think it works. I think the better way to do it is through the market in a broad sense, right? And both in the sense of like make something that is that show that you can do it in a different way from a commercial, from a market perspective. But I mean market also in the broader sense of market of ideas, right? Where if you think you see another way of producing or rolling out this technology or navigating these very difficult things that I've talked about, it's probably better, instead of fighting about it within one organization, to have two organizations, each of which tries to do it their own way, and then how does it work out? How viable commercially are the two efforts? How much are they able to stick to their values? What happens inside the companies if it's like an experiment. You run it for a few years. I feel pretty good about how our side of the experiment has gone. I won't speak for the other side or for anyone else. And certainly it hasn't been perfect. And all the difficulties I've described of the experiment, of the challenge, certainly make me think that there's always room for improvement, right? Someone else should come along and try to do it even better. That's what I've used this phrase, race to the top, right? Where there's some importance in, again, especially the marketplace of ideas, to come up with ways to do this that are better, more innovative, but that also address the safety and ethics component, right? I've talked many times about our responsible scaling plan, which we adopted, and then after we adopted it, the other companies in the space adopted it as well. So there's this kind of like positive copy or positive mimicking that
if you had to distill the difference, or like even just because you helped build OpenAI, and then you left to do it a different way. If you had to distill the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best, and again, I'm not going to try and represent anyone else's, like they'd probably say a different thing than I would. But, I think at least one of the principles that's been important to Anthropic is, we've tried to, one way we say it is like, show, not tell, right? Like we've tried to make as few promises as we can, to be a little bit understated, but to really deliver and to have substance on what we do deliver, right? The LTVT is really important. The responsible scaling plan is really important. Our safety research is really important. We've really tried to have substance behind them. We've recognized that this is a difficult, as I described, that the exponential increase of the power of these models, it presents humanity and any company or organization with a bunch of dilemmas, and we tried to grapple with these dilemmas absolutely as best we can. We've recognized that there are trade-offs. We tried to make things experimental. When we put out the LTVT, we said, hey, this is an experiment. We don't ultimately know if this is going to work, right? Same with the responsible scaling plan that we've updated a bunch of times. And so I think this idea that we don't have all the answers, we're not necessarily, presenting ourselves as like, the good guys or the guys who have all the answers or the right way to do things. But when we do say that we'll do something, we try and to a good approximation, try to do that thing. So that kind of experimental or scientific method in feeling our way out, right? In kind of honestly trying to figure out what the right approach is. I think that's been pretty essential to us. Many of our founders are scientists of different stripes, and so approaching this from a scientific perspective rather than this is the moral way to do it. This is right, and everyone else who does this is wrong or lesser. I think that's never been a useful attitude, because probably we're not doing it optimally, and someone could come along and do better than we are.
Just wondering, have you had any moments over the past, well, not just 3 years here, but also at OpenAI, where you had a kind of a pit of your stomach moment of like, oh, this thing is doing this thing, which is very worrying?
Yeah, a few things. One, I think in 2018 or so, when I first saw like GPT-2,
did you develop or lead that?
Yeah. There were a few people involved, but I was kind of, kind of led the team that did the key scaling. Picked up on GPT-1, which was done by others, but then kind of led the GPT-2 effort. And the ability of the model to kind of generate, content that maybe just kind of was like its ability to just generate slop and make things up and kind of do a good job of it concerned me. Not that I thought this was a concern at the time, but looking at the exponential and where it was going, and I think the way that was communicated, again, it was like filtered through an organization, whose way of communicating I didn't necessarily fully endorse, and whose history and baggage I didn't necessarily fully endorse. But I think the point of the message around GPT-2 is, hey, this is going in a direction that could be concerning, and we should take slow steps, around this and take a responsible attitude. I think some of the stuff around coding that we've seen, I think there are companies that are working now to use our coding models like 3.5 Sonnet to do things like automated vulnerability discovery and penetration testing.
Sort of like automated hacking.
Well, not to do it offensively, but to do us defend. But of course, it's dual use. It can be used on both sides, and so being able to do that responsibly, I think, is a very important thing, right? That we need to make sure if the capabilities exist, we need to use them to identify vulnerabilities and patch them. so that we can, defend our computer infrastructure better than we have in the past. And so, responsible disclosure and the order in which these things are done is I think really quite important.
Right. Any other kind of, for lack of a better term, oh shit moments?
Yeah, I feel like every new model, in a certain way, every new model is an oh shit moment because it kind of it validates the curve is continuing, and every new model is unsurprising because it's just the curve continuing. So that's kind of the duality. Everything is extremely surprising in its details and what exactly it says to you, but unsurprising in that we're now accepting the trend. So,
and is that relentless? Is the relentlessness of the scaling surprising?
Yeah.
And how much is that? Because it feels like that's kind of what drove you in part to write Machines of Love and Grace, right? Is that you're just like, this doesn't appear to be slowing down.
Yeah.
And if we continue on the trajectory, then ...
So you basically never know. I mean, my highest level expectation is it's going to continue because I've seen it do so many times. But every part of that curve, I've been watching that curve for 10 years. And every part of that curve, every year there's like a point where it looks like it's going to slow down. You train the model, and it looked like it leveled off because you weren't using the right kind of data, or you kind of had numerical problems at the new scale, or the cluster wasn't quite working right. And so there's like problems at every stage. And at every stage it looks like it might slow down, and every time so far it's kind of cleared. We always kind of find a way around it, right? The force and the number of things you can try is always such that the curve, roughly with little wiggles, manages to continue. So again, there's this duality. It's super surprising because somehow it always gets through, and the results are so eye-popping. But at the same time, it's not surprising because it's the curve. It's a curve we predicted many years ago. It's surprising and it's not.
How do you think about the kind of competition with China piece? And this kind of setting out as this is the most important race to win of this century.
Yeah. So I think this very subtle question, right? That can provide a really serious strategic advantage, right? That can make up for in every new conflict, old technologies become much less relevant. Like battleships replaced by aircraft carriers in World War II, and in Ukraine we see that these tank-seeking missiles are making tanks much less valuable. And so is just about everything about to become much less valuable, and AI will become the thing that's most valuable.
So the reason I ask is I was talking to somebody who was a founder of a tech-based defense contractor, and he was saying that in his world, like in the Pentagon, AI is seen as what they call I can't remember if it's the third or the fourth offset, and the previous offsets being that once someone has technology X, it renders the other side already defeated without enough. Like there was a nuclear bomb, and then there were intercontinental ballistic missiles, be able to deliver those on your shores, etc. They're like, this is the next one. And I'm just wondering, it sounds like you...
That would be my guess. Again, we don't know. The scale could slow down. So that's my guess. And I think the democracies of the world, I think, need to get together and I think recognize the situation they're in and address the threat. Now, at the same time, I want to say an international arms race is just the sort of thing. It's worth acknowledging that can accelerate things in a way that makes us skimp on a lot of the safety concerns that we have. So we're in a difficult situation, right? So I think me and other people can get a lot of criticism on both sides, right? Where are being supportive enough of winning the race against China versus is this reckless because we're not slowing down on say. And my point of view on this is just look like. The situation we're in doesn't have to have some easy, correct, or moral answer, right? We can be in a dilemma where there's no perfect solution. There are, however, things we can do to kind of get the best of both worlds. I think the more we can have a lead against China, the more we can use that lead, the more we can kind of spend it to make sure that we're doing things safely. So I think the combination of a posture where we try to get ahead of and slow down authoritarian countries and then use the surplus that we have, which, if we're lucky, could be like 2 or 3 years, to be careful, to put in place judicious regulation that, make sure that, yes, we're building these very powerful things, but, make sure that there are rules of the road and that we build them carefully. Some things that I think help with that. I mean, I think some of the semiconductor policies, the export controls on chips and semiconductors have helped to hold back authoritarian states, right? When we do interviews with, there have been interviews with, folks in China, and they say we can't get enough chips. If we got enough chips, we could catch up. And so that's something that gives us more room on both sides. I think we also shouldn't give up just talking to China. Like, maybe they can recognize the dangers themselves, and we should do some effort to work with them to set some limits, just as we negotiated on nuclear weapons with the Soviet Union. So I'm not a complete hawk. I think we should do what we can to work with them. It's just the economic and military incentives are so great that I think we should not have expectations that are too high in terms of what we can accomplish by such cooperation. We should try to cooperate when we can, but we also should not be naive about when the world works, about how the world works. So, again, we should kind of try all the options, but we're in a difficult situation, and we should do whatever we can to kind of create the space for good solutions.
Were you surprised during the most recent election, both in the UK and the US, that AI will change?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised, but at the same time, one thing I found is you can't predict exactly when something's going to enter the public consciousness. Like the explosion of interest in AI in 2023, I think the pieces were there for very clearly seeing what was going to happen in 2021 and 2022 or even 2020. Just from the models we built then, it was already clear that the impact would be very large. And so, there was no reaction for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden. So, I think I've learned that you kind of can't predict exactly when something, goes viral or enters the public consciousness. It's very loosely correlated to the, potential for the technology, the things that are happening, but only very loosely. As always, we should acknowledge that there's some possibility that I'm just wrong about these things, that others who say the same things are just wrong, and in 2030 we'll all laugh at this and, look at the crazy predictions that I made and, how ridiculous they all were. That's not what I suspect, but it's very hard to exclude. We as humans, we have very limited minds. Our ability to predict things is very limited, as much as people like to present themselves as the guru on that. There's no one really knows.
What a fascinating interview. What a fascinating interview. And what a fascinating time to speak to someone who is one of the leaders in this technology as it unfolds as well. It's a really interesting inflection point.
How do you feel? Are you feeling hopeful? Are you feeling freaked out? Are you feeling skeptical?
I feel a little more convinced than I did before I had the interview.
I have to say, I came out, the word is Claude-pilled.
You drank the Claudade.
Claudade. Yeah, well, because I was able to, as I said, because I'm doing this larger piece for the paper magazine, I got to speak to, the whole kind of top team, basically, and, that I had an interesting conversation with the CTO, who's, leading the actual building of these models, and he was like, I remember a couple of years ago, we were so excited the day that Claude figured out how to rhyme. Now it's doing computer use, where it's like, hey Claude, go fix this problem in another part of my computer, get me a plane ticket, and it just takes control of your mouse, takes control of your computer, goes on the internet, does stuff. It's like writing really high-level computer code.
Taking a bar exam.
Exactly, and then 2 years ago they're like, yay, rhyme, fat cat math. And you're kind of like, whoa. Just the kind of, as we were talking about there, this kind of the scaling laws being so relentlessly going in one direction.
But I don't think we should lose sight of the funding point, which is, as you said, the dance partner analogy is brilliant. This is big tech becoming even bigger.
I asked because there's a tension here, right? One of the things they talk about is they've given the Claude a constitution. They call it constitutional AI. And it's a mix of terms of service, from companies like Apple, but also the UN Convention on Human Rights and things like this. And basically it's like this governing document that Claude must abide by.